Whoever masters their thoughts is no longer a slave to the world. That's what God whispered to Epictetus, not with a thunderous voice, but with the silence of one who knows that the greatest truths don't need to shout. Epictetus, the slave who could not be enslaved, had lost everything except one thing: his mind, and in that inner space, in that terrain that no one could take from him, he began to build his empire, a kingdom without walls, but with an impenetrable fortress. One night, while chains weighed on his wrists, Epictetus spoke to God, not to ask for freedom, nor revenge, nor miracles. He simply asked one question, the most human, and at the same time, the most divine. How can I keep being myself when everything else has been taken from me? And God answered, not with a phrase, but with an inner journey, a path marked by 8 revelations, 8 secrets that don't promise comfort, but do promise invulnerability, because the soul that understands these truths becomes unstoppable, not because of what it faces, but because of how it chooses to face it. This audiobook is not just for listening, it's for awakening, for breaking the chains that are unseen, the ones you carry within, so that, in the end, you don't just understand what Epictetus discovered, but feel it vibrate in your own life. Here begins that journey. And every word is written to temper you, not to entertain you. Get ready. Because once you hear what God said to Epictetus, you will never be the same again. Chapter 1. The Silence That Listens. Has it happened to you that someone gives you a dirty look, and without saying a word, your mind kicks in, speeds up, creates a story? Do they dislike me? Did I do something wrong? What are they thinking about me? And that thought, even if no one confirmed it, ruins your morning. Sometimes, what hurts you is not what happens, but what you believe is happening. That's the most common prison today, and almost no one realizes they're in it. We live believing the world hurts us, when in reality, it's our mind that's shooting from the inside. Epictetus knew this centuries ago. He also lived among men who yelled, who judged, who mistreated. But unlike them, he learned to live without obeying the noise. He said, "I am not disturbed by events, but by the way I interpret them." And in that, his freedom was hidden. It wasn't a motto, it was a daily practice, a way of seeing the world where power doesn't lie in what happens, but in how you choose to think about it. Think for a moment about how many times you've lost your peace because of an idea, not reality, but an interpretation. Your boss didn't reply to a message, and you assumed he was upset. Your partner stayed silent, and you imagined the worst. A friend didn't invite you, and you filled the silence with assumptions. That, which seems normal, is the root of modern suffering. We don't live events, we live what we believe they mean. Epictetus, from his cell, from his lameness, teaches us that we don't have to fight the world. We have to learn to read it clearly. And clarity begins in silence. That moment when you stop looking for answers outside and begin to observe yourself within. It's not easy, because the world rewards those who react quickly. But you're not here to react. You're here to choose, and choosing with virtue requires learning to listen. Not to others, but to your mind. Listening to when it exaggerates, when it fears, when it lies to itself, and by doing so, you begin to reclaim yourself. Epictetus wasn't born wise, but he did learn to live without needing approval, without begging for attention, without being a victim of automatic thoughts. And that you can learn too. The first step is realizing how much you master yourself. when you decide not to be dominated by your automatic thinking. Today, maybe, someone didn't reply, maybe someone ignored you, but none of that belongs to you. What does belong to you is what you decide to think about it. And in that space, between the event and the thought, lives your power. That is the place where Epictetus spoke with God. That is the moment where you too can begin to truly listen to yourself. Because a mind that observes itself is a mind that frees itself. He who learns to listen from silence builds an inner fortress that no external storm can break. And when that silence becomes deep, even a prisoner can be freer than someone walking on the street. Chapter 2. The prisoner who was free. Being a prisoner is not being locked behind walls. It's being trapped inside a thought you can't let go. Free people live imprisoned by the past, by guilt, by an unfulfilled expectation, or by a constant need for approval, and they call that life. But Epictetus, who knew literal slavery, left us a truth that disturbs. There are more men enslaved outside than inside a cell. Because he who depends on the external to feel at peace is chained even if he sees no bars. When Epictetus spoke with God, he didn't ask for things, he asked for clarity. He didn't ask for the world to change. He asked that his mind not be tainted by it, because he understood something that today seems forgotten. God doesn't always change circumstances, but he gives you the strength to stand tall within them. And that strength comes from right thinking, not from comfortable thoughts, but from those that bring order, even if they hurt. Today, thousands of people are emotionally drained, not because the world is so cruel, but because they're trying to fix outside what is falling apart inside. They want others to change, for their partner to notice, for their boss to value them, for life to treat them better. And they live exhausted because they haven't realized that real power lies in how you think when you have no control over anything. What you think when no one applauds you, when no one understands you, when nothing goes as planned. That is what made Epictetus free. And that's what can make you free too. Learning to look at an unfair situation and not using it as an excuse to destroy yourself, but as the ground where your character is sharpened, as the place where the most sacred part of your soul is forged. God is not a promise of immediate success. He is a silent guide for inner mastery. That's why, when Epictetus sat in solitude, without status, without possessions, without comforts, he didn't lament, he meditated. He didn't scream at the sky. He listened. He didn't ask, why me? He asked, how can I act with virtue here? And that question can change your whole life. There are men today who have money, relationships, prestige, but have no self-control. They live irritable, dependent, fragile in the face of any criticism. And that is not freedom. That is luxury without sovereignty. And Epictetus reminds us that the highest luxury is having an unshakable mind, one that cannot be bought, one that cannot be taught with words, but cultivated with discipline and courage. You don't need everything to be okay to be okay. You need your mind to be stronger than your circumstances. And that is trained. It's trained when you choose to think differently, even when it hurts. When instead of seeking blame, you seek clarity. When you accept reality without allowing it to define your dignity. God is there in that moment when you could react like everyone else, but you choose to respond like very few, in that instant when you could give in to resentment, but you choose lucidity, not because you don't feel, but because you've decided that your soul is worth more than your impulse. Epictetus was a prisoner, but no one could possess his thoughts. And that is what made him powerful, because true power is not having it all. It's not losing yourself when it seems like you're losing everything. He who is free within will never be a slave on the outside, even if chained 1,000 times. But there is a freedom even harder to recognize, the one that is unseen, but transforms everything from the core. Chapter 3. The freedom that cannot be seen. There is a form of slavery that no one mentions, but many live it daily. The need to respond to everything, to react to the annoying message, to the sarcastic comment, to someone else's judgment. The habit of keeping your soul open to anyone who wants to provoke you. And that, although it seems normal, is an invisible chain heavier than any physical shackle. Because when everything affects you, it's because you haven't yet discovered where your power ends and where the world's begins. Epictetus said that if someone insults you and you get angry, the problem is not the insult, but the judgment you placed upon it, because nothing external has power except the power you give it. This is seen all the time today. Think of Will Smith, a life built with discipline, respect, effort, and a single joke, one provocation, made him react in front of millions, and in seconds. He lost what mattered most, his self-control. That wasn't just a slap, it was surrender to impulse. And you see the same on social media, where someone like Messi, a global icon, can be criticized for no reason, and still remain silent, without reacting, without attacking, because he knows that the one who answers everything burns out, but the one who chooses his battles preserves himself. That is the freedom that cannot be seen, the freedom from ego slavery. Or think of Keanu Reeves, a world-famous actor, with a life full of loss, tragedy, and challenges, and yet his way of responding to the world is not with complaints or impulsive reactions. It is with stillness, with distance, with mastery. And that's not learned overnight. It's trained, it's chosen, it's cultivated over time. God, in the Stoic view, is not the one who erases the offense. He's the one who gives you the clarity not to absorb it. He doesn't grant immunity from the world. He grants composure in pain. He shows you that if you let yourself be dragged by every opinion, you are abandoning the throne of your consciousness and kneeling before what others think of you. True freedom is not doing whatever you want. It's not needing to react to every push. It's being the owner of your response, even when your whole body wants to answer with rage. That is what separates the wise from the ordinary. Epictetus reminds us that the one who masters himself no longer needs to win arguments, because he understands that self-respect is not negotiated through shouting. It is honored in silence. And if you ever doubt that power, remember this: if the greatest fall for not knowing how to stay grounded, you can become great. If you learn to remain in peace when everything tries to take you out of it. He who chooses how to think has already conquered the hardest empire of all, his own mind. And when you realize that, even the deepest pain can become a sacred guide toward your truth. Chapter 4. The pain that shows you the way. Pain doesn't always come to break you. Sometimes it comes to shape you. But most people don't see it that way. As soon as they feel discomfort, they complain, they run away, or blame someone else, as if suffering had no meaning, as if it were a punishment and not a sign. And that's where Epictetus gives us a lesson few have the courage to accept. He said, "Do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to. Rather, want them to happen as they do." In other words, if it hurts, don't ask why it hurts. Ask what it came to teach you. Imagine for a moment someone like Stephen Hawking, a man who lost almost all physical control of his body, but not his mind. How many would have said his life ended there? How many would have given up? But he chose to turn his pain into focus, into study, into purpose. That's the secret. Pain can destroy you or refine you. It depends on what you do with it when it arrives. Epictetus knew it. He was a slave, lame, and rejected. But his mind was free because he never used pain as an excuse. He used it as a drive. And that's the difference between those who rise and those who victimize themselves. We all suffer. We all lose. We all fall. But not everyone turns those wounds into direction, into inner fire, into meaning. Look at someone like Viktor Frankl, prisoner in a concentration camp, stripped of everything except his awareness. And it was there, in the midst of horror, that he discovered humans can endure almost anything. If they find a why, that's what you're missing when pain crushes you. A why, a higher perspective, a thought that lifts you out of lament and gives you back control. Because when it hurts, the easiest thing is to blame, but the bravest thing is to observe, to understand what part of you is resisting, what part of you is being called to grow. And when you do that, pain becomes a teacher you never forget, one that strengthens you where you needed it most. Epictetus didn't speak of avoiding pain. He spoke of not wasting it, of not going through it without transforming. And that's why, when life hits you, don't ask if you deserved it. Ask if you're going to use it. God doesn't eliminate the trial. He walks with you through it. He doesn't erase the pain. He gives you eyes to face it and turn it into character. And there, right there, when you stop resisting and choose to learn, pain stops being an enemy and becomes a guide. Whoever stops running from pain discovers that it held the map to their most authentic strength. And when that pain has opened your eyes, you then understand that the power of your life begins with a decision. Chapter 5. The power of deciding who you are. Life doesn't hand you an identity. You decide who you will be every time someone offends you. You decide whether to be resentful or compassionate. Every time things don't go your way, you decide whether to be a victim or a strategist. And every time the world tries to turn you into a copy, you can stay true to yourself or let them reshape you. That is one of the most powerful and most ignored decisions. Epictetus said we are not disturbed by events, but by the interpretation we give them. And within that interpretation is the identity we build, not the one we inherit, not the one others expect, but the one we choose, because no one can make you feel lesser unless you decide to see yourself that way. Think of Malala Yousafzai, a teenager they tried to silence with a bullet. But she chose to become a voice. She chose to define herself by her mission, not by her fear. Or someone like Nelson Mandela, 27 years in prison, years that could have turned him cold inside, but instead, he emerged with more clarity, more peace, more leadership, because pain didn't make him a victim. It made him a symbol. That's what Stoicism teaches. It's not about denying what happens to you. It's about deciding who you will be in response to it. And that is what truly makes us free. Because the world may strike you, betray you, try to break you, but it cannot choose how you respond. God, from the Stoic perspective, doesn't impose an identity on you. He gives you the gift of choosing it, and whispers to you amid chaos, remember who you can become. You decide whether to be bitter or resilient, to grow or repeat, to use your experience to harden or to enlighten others. And you see it in daily life too. Someone loses a job and falls apart, or someone else loses the same job and starts a business, One gets betrayed and shuts down. Another gets betrayed and learns to set boundaries with dignity. It's not the event that defines us. It's the decision born within. The great mistake is thinking we are what happened to us, when in reality, we are what we did with what happened to us, and that is something no one can take from you. So next time something breaks you, drains you, makes you doubt, take a pause and remember, you choose who you will be after that. Don't let the world choose for you. The one who decides who they want to be no longer defines themselves by opinions nor by mistakes, but by their will. And with that clarity, it becomes urgent to learn to distinguish between the noise outside and the real voice within. Chapter 6. The Noise of the World and the Inner Voice. We live in an era where everyone has something to say, and almost no one knows how to be silent, where the outer noise is so loud that few manage to hear what they truly carry within: social media, other people's opinions, trends, demands. Each day feels like a competition to fit in, to react, to please. But Stoicism teaches the opposite, that freedom begins when you dare to think for yourself. Epictetus made it clear, if you want to live with purpose, you can't listen to everyone or seek validation from those who don't know your path. Because when you define yourself by what others say, you're giving away the helm of your life to the wind of opinions. And you see this in figures like Zazie Beetz, an actress who refused to mold herself to Hollywood standards and chose roles that reflected her vision, her soul, her essence, without selling her voice for fame. Or in someone like Marcus Rashford, a young footballer who chose not to live only for applause and used his platform to defend hungry children. His voice was not dictated by the noise, but by his conscience. That is the secret of the steady man. It's not that he ignores the world, it's that he doesn't allow the world to rewrite him, because he knows that noise distracts. But the inner voice guides. God, on this path, doesn't shout from the outside. He whispers from within. When there's silence, when there's honesty, when you turn everything off to feel what you truly believe, that's when you find yourself, and when you know which steps are yours and which are borrowed. The problem is that many listen more to an influencer than to their own intuition, more to a stranger in a comment than to their own heart. And that's why they live borrowed lives, borrowed goals, decisions made out of fear and not truth. The Stoic warrior knows that the only opinion that should carry weight is the one formed in stillness when he turns off the world and turns on his soul. Because in that silence, there are no filters, no applause, only clarity. So the next time you don't know what to do, don't rush to ask, don't react instantly. Close your eyes and wait. Because when your soul speaks, it always does so in a low voice. But if you learn to hear it, you'll know which path is yours, and which is just a distraction disguised as opportunity. The one who silences the world to hear himself becomes the master of his destiny, even if everything out there tells him he cannot. And in achieving that, he discovers that his greatest wealth is not measured by what he has, but by what he can let go of without losing his peace. Chapter 7. The Wealth That Cannot Be Bought. There is something more valuable than money, rarer than gold, and more coveted by those who wake up late in life. That wealth is peace. Not the fake peace of someone who has everything but can't sleep, but the real peace of the one who knows himself, respects himself, and doesn't sell out. Epictetus taught that the truly rich is not the one who accumulates, but the one who needs little, because he has understood that value is not in what you possess, but in what you can release without fear. We live surrounded by mirages, cars that don't represent freedom, but debts, clothes that don't dress the soul, only cover insecurities, showroom lives that hide anxiety behind the scenes, because many want to appear successful, but very few ask themselves what success truly is. Look at someone like Keanu Reeves, an actor who could live like a king, but chooses to live like an ordinary man, rides the subway, listens more than he speaks, and helps in silence because he understands that his wealth is not in his bank account, but in his way of being in the world. Or consider someone like Rick Rubin, producer of Stars, millionaire, but completely detached from the noise. He lives in what is essential, with no need to adorn himself, because he knows that peace cannot be bought. It must be cultivated. Epictetus, who was a slave and then a teacher, knew that material things fade, recognition disappears, but a calm soul remains. And that's why he repeated that you should not define yourself by what you possess, but by what you can lose without losing yourself. God doesn't measure your wealth by what you accumulate, but by what you're able to give thanks for when you have nothing, and when you can look at your life with honesty and feel fulfilled even if you have only the essentials. Then you have reached a wealth that the world cannot steal from you. The Stoic warrior walks lightly, because he is not tied to the external. He strengthens himself in the internal, and that is what makes him unbreakable. Not his power, but his peace. So when you feel empty, even though you have much, or confused in the midst of success, stop and ask yourself, does this fulfill me or just distract me? Because true abundance is not having more, it is needing less, and still feeling like nothing is missing. The one who no longer needs to have, in order to feel full, has reached the freedom that neither time nor failure can take away. And only then are you ready to receive the final secret, the one that transforms the mind into a rock and the soul into an eternal flame. Chapter 8. The Secret of the Unbreakable Mind. It's not muscle, not a loud voice, not an intimidating presence that makes someone unbreakable. It is their mind, trained, focused, calm in the midst of the storm, free in the midst of pressure, invisible, yet powerful, because what is truly invincible is never seen. It is sustained from within. Epictetus had no wealth, no fame, no external freedom, but he was unbreakable, because nothing that happened outside could destabilize his soul, because he had already decided that his power did not depend on anything or anyone, and when someone chooses that, the world loses its control over him. Today, when everything pushes you to react, to get offended, to compete, to compare yourself, the one who remains serene is the one who has the advantage, not because he is indifferent, but because he has learned that what matters is not having control, but not needing it. A person becomes unbreakable when their worth no longer depends on the opinions of others, when they don't need to impress or win every argument, when their peace is not negotiable and their time is not wasted, when they don't break from a loss nor inflate from praise, but instead remain clear, present, firm. Look at someone like Giannis Antetokounmpo, a player who has won almost everything, but doesn't lose his center, because he understands that gratitude, humility, and silent work are stronger than any trophy. Or think of anonymous people, like a single mother who day after day wakes up before the sun, with dignity, with determination, with a strength that cannot be seen, but holds up entire worlds. God doesn't give you the unbreakable mind as a gift. He gives you the trials so that you can develop it. And every time pain comes, every time life tests you, it is an opportunity not to destroy you, but to reveal what lies within you. The unbreakable mind is not learned from books. It is forged in the fire of life. It is nurtured in silence, in self-mastery, in the ability to lose, without losing faith, to fall, without stopping, to see everything crumble, and still remain standing. And you, if you've made it this far, you are no longer the same as when you started this audiobook, because now you know that the most valuable thing is not what surrounds you, but what sustains you from within, and that no one can take from you. So walk with calm, speak with intention, act with integrity, and remember, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be faithful to what you believe, and persistent with what matters. The one who masters his thoughts is no longer a slave to the world. And if you've reached the end, you've already begun to master yours.